What's up, everybody? Ron Placone here. My movie, Left at Wall, is out now. We did a soft screening in San Pedro, California as part of the San Pedro International Film Festival, and we're having more screenings and events throughout the country and internationally as well. The first few screenings that have already been announced and confirmed: February 22nd, Tucson, Arizona; March 20th, Washington, D.C., March 22nd, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The event in Pittsburgh is a screening and a short stand-up show and a Q&A after, so I'll be there. You can get tickets and more information now at ronplacone.com. My movie is called Left at Wall, and it stars myself, Gareth Reynolds from The Dollop, Sarah K. Godot, Kimberly Hill. There are appearances by Sage Francis, Graham Elwood, Eddie Pepitone, Dave Anthony, Krish Moen. I'm so excited for you guys to see this movie. I really, truly am. So those first few screenings have already been announced. Again, that's February 22nd, Tucson, Arizona; March 20th, Washington, D.C., March 22nd, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We're going to be having a weekend of events in Sheffield out in the UK. We'll be announcing more and more as time goes on. But for those 3 screenings, you can get your tickets and more information right now over at ronplacone.com. Episode 11, Lach. Regina Spektor, The Moldy Peaches, Beck, Hamell On Trial, Soft Black. All of those artists have one music scene in common: the New York, later Lower East Side anti-folk scene that Lach is the main architect of. We talk about the building of that scene as well as his newest creative endeavor. Lach recently wrote and published a young adult fiction novel called Langdimania. I've read it, and it's great. Imagine Narnia meets Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Lach lives in Edinburgh, Scotland now, and has for quite some time. I proposed to my now wife in Princess Street Garden in Edinburgh. Around a year later, I was performing my own updated version of the Phil Oakes classic, Love Me, I'm a Liberal. Thanks to Lach, I learned, during the recording of this interview, about a very interesting connection between those two things. Please welcome to the show, Lach. I've followed, the scenes that you basically helped build for many years online. But if you don't mind, I'd like to start in your own words. How would you describe the anti-folk scene that you were, such a big part of in New York City, and how did that all come to be?
Oh, well, I was a classical musician from an early age, and I was like a piano prodigy, age 5, 6, playing classical music. And I didn't listen to much pop music growing up. There was the AM radio on the way to piano lessons. For those 20 minutes, I would hear Music Radio 77 WABC, and I'd hear some pop music. But other than that, I didn't hear much. But eventually, fast forward, I started getting into poetry as well as music. And then I discovered this thing called songs, which was the marriage of words and music. And I just became fascinated with songs. And
now, how old were you at this point?
About 16-ish.
Okay.
And started looking into that. Then punk hit. I saw it was on 60 Minutes. There was a 60 Minutes on punk rock, this evil scourge coming from the UK. And I was watching this, and it just blew my mind. They had pictures of Sex Pistols and the Clash, and they were calling them musicians. I was like, how is that a musician? They're not wearing suits and ties, which is what I would wear when I'm playing Beethoven sonatas, So I went out the next day and got Sex Pistols, and I got the Clash, and I got the Jam, and loved it, and especially the Clash because of the lyrics. And then I went backwards and started learning about the predecessors. So Beatles, Stones, Doors, Dylan, back to Woody Guthrie. And I looked in the Village Voice and saw that, I'd gotten this biography on Dylan and saw that he played Gertie Oak City in the Village of New York. And I looked in the Village Voice and it was still going. So I headed down to the West Village, early 80s, and went to the open mic at Folk City and thinking that they're going to totally dig what I do. But they did not dig that combination of punk and what they were calling folk. But and so I was, it was a hard time there. And they said that I wasn't folk. And I didn't understand that because I'm a white guy playing 3 chords on an acoustic guitar. They're white guys playing 3 chords on acoustic guitar. How come they're folk and I'm not folk? And I quickly realized that was Dylan Electric, the people that the so-called folk artists that were left behind, circled their wagons and said, we're not going to let this happen to us again. Because if you went to Tower Records, you had an entire floor that was rock and roll. They had one little bit that was folk music, but they wanted to stay the big cheeses in those little bins. And so when I came around combining punk with acoustic, they circled the wagons once again and kept getting kicked out of the clubs. And I started hanging out in the alleyway behind the clubs, and I would have like 30 people in the alleyway drinking 40s and playing punk folk acoustic music. And I said, well, this is crazy. And I was on Blue McDougal at the time, so I moved to the Lower East Side onto Rivington Street. And I got a loft space and I gutted it. I put in a stage. I slept on the stage during the day and I would open up as a completely illegal after-hour club at night. In my first week running that club, they were running the New York Folk Festival in the West Village. So I decided to start the New York Anti-Folk Festival, along with some other people like Cindy Berryhill, Kirk Kelly, Billy Nova, Roger Manning. Those were some early people on that scene. And we just started our own thing there on Rivington Street. The Daily News called it the most dangerous block in New York City. So we put that piece of paper and put it on the wall. And that was the birth of it. That was the early 80s. And then it just continued to grow over the years as new waves of people arrived in the city. And I don't know how much I want to go in, but that's origins.
When did you find the home at the Sidewalk Cafe? I know you were at Sidewalk for a long time, and then I believe after Sidewalk you were elsewhere for a short period. But a lot of times when you hear people talk about the anti-hoot, they kind of they also are simultaneous with the Sidewalk Cafe. So when did that start up?
Yeah, well, that's actually quite interesting because there was at least 6-7 years of anti-folk before I started running. So I ran it at Rivington Street for a year and a half. And then the cops came by and said, look, you know, because the cops were on my side. Because when the cops first came to us in the first couple of weeks, they were Irish cops, and Kirk Kelly, a wonderful singer-songwriter from the Lower East Side, Irish dude, he was on stage singing some Irish folk song when the cops came in, you know, the bus, and they were like, nothing wrong here, laddie, it's okay. So I was in with the cops. But after about a year and a half, we started getting a lot of publicity, and the cops came back and were like, Lach, we can give you another 2 weeks, but you got to get out of here. So I was like, what do we do now? And my club was called The Fort, like the Hidden Fortress from Akira Kurosawa, but it just became The Fort. And I said, all right, let me keep the name and see if I could bring the club into another club. So the first place that we traveled to was Sophie's Bar, which at the time was where Sidewalk's Bar came. But that used to be Sophie's Bar, and Eddie Dixon and Trish and Snooki would be performing there. And I started running the Fort there, and then she moved to Fifth Street and moved with her. And we started having our first acts signed. So Roger Manning got signed to Black Flag's label, and so did Kirk Kelly. Michelle Schacht, her album came out on Cooking Vinyl. So that was like the first big wave of anti-folk was out of Sophie's Bar. And then Brenda Kahn got signed to Columbia. And LaForte moved around to other clubs. So mainly Sophie's, and at a club called Chameleon Bar, which is on 6th Street, which was 6th Street between A and B. That's where Paleface and Beck came onto the scene, was there. And then I was out in San Francisco for a little while, and I ran a scene out there. When I came back to New York in 92, I stopped in Sidewalk to visit a friend of mine, Laura, from the band Mongrel Bitch. And she said, oh, the owners here want to do something with the back room. Could you give them some advice and insight on how to have live music back there? And they came over. I was not planning to stay in New York. I was planning to go on to Europe. But I gave them a bunch of advice, and they said, well, can you start working here and run it? And I said, well, I could run it for a couple of weeks until I get you on your feet and then, have someone else do it. And then I stayed there for 15 years. And so a lot of people, when they think of anti-folk, they think of Sidewalk, but there was a lot of history before we even got to Sidewalk. And the early years of Sidewalk had their own history. A lot of people associate the period of the late 90s at Sidewalk, I think, because that's when we had a very good wave of anti-folk with the Moldy Peaches, Jeffrey Lewis, Regina Spektor. I had the Anti-Hoot Cable show on Manhattan Cable. So there's just been these waves of it. And after Sidewalk, I wasn't going to do anything, but I ended up doing stuff at Webster Hall for a year or two. I became executive producer over there and had some wild times. And then I moved here where I live now, to Scotland. I live in Edinburgh now.
Yeah, I mean, that was actually where I wanted to go next. What kind of went into that decision? You left the U.S. You were you were from New York originally too, yeah? That's where. Yeah. So what kind of factored into the Edinburgh decision, whatever you want to share anyway? And it sounds like you were considering Europe for a while, but why is that? And what finally, got you to the UK?
Well, I toured the UK. I was touring the UK pretty regularly. And I'd been wanting to get out of New York for a while. There was a lot of, it's just quite a stressful place, especially when you're like the center of a art and music movement and everyone's projecting their stuff onto you, where they're projecting their daddy issues onto you. There becomes a lot of stress. And then 9/11 happened, and I just felt like I was living in the middle of a target, like a bullseye. And every day on the radio, you would hear, it's going to happen again. Are you ready? It's going to happen again. Are you ready? It's like, I'm just trying to write a song. So I'd been wanting to leave for a while. And then there were some family issues and things, of health issues in my family. And we just felt like we want a new start somewhere else. And these signs kept pointing to Edinburgh. A record label wanted to put out my album. They were based in Edinburgh. I got invited to do the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. And so I came over and did that and just fell in love with the city. It's just enchantingly beautiful. And a year later, I moved here. And BBC Radio 4 offered me a comedy series. And so I did 3 seasons of a comedy series called The Lach Chronicles with them. And it's just a delightful, it's a delightful town, Edinburgh. It's enchanting. The architecture's from the 13th and 1400s, it never got bombed during World War II. So everything's still intact. And the comedy scene is very strong here. The music scene's not as strong in Edinburgh as it is in Glasgow. And that's unfortunate, but this is where I am here and now.
No, it is a wonderful place. I mean, I'm doing the Edinburgh Fringe for the first time in 2023. I'll have already done it by the time this is out, but yeah, like I'm doing Edinburgh, and I've only ever been to Edinburgh as a tourist, but I got engaged there, so
Oh,
it's
wow.
yeah, it's a special place to me too.
Where were you when you proposed?
So I was in, like in Prince's Square Garden.
Prince's Garden, yeah.
Okay,
Right.
all right. Sometimes I accidentally say Prince's Street, and my wife, my now wife, always corrects me because I'm like, but yeah. So
It's
is it
Prince's Street.
Oh, it is. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Whatever it is, I always say if it's not, then
The square thing is wrong.
Okay, that's what I say then. I say the wrong thing, and then my wife corrects me. Okay. So either I'm saying square, or I'm saying street. But yeah. So Princess Street Garden, where there's like there's the one like kind of big dip where you go like down the hill and up the other one, like the big one, and then through that you can see all the castles and just
okay. Yes, I very, very, very much know it. And it's the reason why I asked you where you were when you proposed, because I had a feeling that's where it was. Yeah. And I'm going to tell you now why that was such a magical place for you to propose. Okay?
Yeah.
So the first time I came to Edinburgh, that street you're talking about, it's called the Mound.
Okay.
And as you drive up, you see the castle on the hill, and next to it are those beautiful white buildings there on the on the cliff. They're called Ramsay Garden. So the first time I was on tour, I think it was with Hamell On Trial, and I was going up the Mound, and I saw that tableau, and I had this feeling, a sort of deja vu kind of feeling, but it was stronger and more significant, as if it was a deja vu of something that was going to happen, not something that did happen. It was a very odd feeling. And then I went and did the show, and it was a tour. So you do the show, you don't get to see much of the city, hotel, next day you're in a new town. Like a year later, I'm back on another 12-city tour, driving, not really, where am I now? And next thing I know, I'm driving up that street again, and there's that tableau again. And I got the feeling again. I was like, wait a second, this isn't a deja vu. I was here before, and that's where I had this weird feeling before. What the hell? So I really got out and explored the city after that gig and just was like, this city's pretty cool. Then we moved here, and my son was 5 when we moved here, so he was about 6, and I was walking him to school through Prince's Garden, right? And we go through the garden, and we climb over the railing onto the street where that mound is, onto that curve.
Yes.
We're talking about. At which point my son says, I feel really weird. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, there's something like magic or weird here. And I was like, really? Because that was the exact spot, So that really stuck with me. And then a couple of years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I was doing some research on one of my favorite songwriters of all time, Phil Oakes. I don't know if you're familiar with Phil Oakes.
Love Phil Oakes.
Okay, I love Phil. I could. This is the first time you're getting an exclusive here, Ron. I'm the guy who stole the Phil Oakes poster off the wall of Folk City when they closed.
No kidding. Nice.
I have the autograph. The statute of limitations are over, and if anyone asks, this is a parody broadcast. It's not true.
Perfect.
But that's just how much I love Phil. So I'm reading up on Phil, and I get to this passage saying that he has these roots in Edinburgh, and his grandfather had a shop up on the Royal Mile. I'm like, whoa, that's wild. Then I find out that a year after he died, his friend took the ashes, came to Edinburgh with the ashes, and threw them over the cliff on that spot where I was having all those experiences.
No way, dude.
Yeah.
That is so... Well, I can add some more trippiness here. I mean, first of all, I, like so many other people, I did a version of Love Me, I'm a Liberal a couple years ago that did kind of okay online. So I'm a big Phil Oakes guy, too. And I think I did it shortly after I proposed. Like, I think that all happened shortly after my proposal. Wow, that is trippy, dude. And also, you mentioned you were touring with Hamell, who is a close mutual friend of both of ours.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. That was how Hamell kind of put us in touch. I mean, I knew about you online for many years, but Hamell introduced us.
I thought for some reason it was Rick Shapiro that was the connection.
No, I know Rick Shapiro a little bit. Like, we've definitely met a handful of times, and I know he was a big sidewalk guy back in the day, but I didn't know him then. But Hamell and I have been buddies since like 2004.
My God. Well, Hamill's one of my favorite all-time performers. I think he's one of the greatest performers, one of the greatest songwriters, a wonderful human being. I wrote a song for him called Hamell On Trial when he got in the car accident. Have you ever heard Hamell On Trial? Have you heard what he does with a guitar? If you've never heard Hamell On Trial, then you've never heard a star.
Dude, yeah. No, I love that guy. I first heard about him through a friend, and then he ended up we became friends because I was actually the first podcast he ever did. I had this goofy little, I was like 20 years old. I had this goofy little podcast, and I reached out. He was on tour with Ani DeFranco, and he was the opening act. Yeah. So I thought, well, maybe he's not going to have much to do if he's the opening act. So I like just sent an email, I think, to like the label or something, because I think he was on her label at the time. And I just said, hey, I have this podcast. You know, I didn't make it out like I was like bigger than I was. I was just like, I just have this little podcast, but I'm a big Hamell On Trial fan. Would he be willing to do it? And he like called me, and he's like, yeah, dude, I think these podcast things sound neat. They remind me of like fanzines from like the 90s or something. Yeah. He's like, I've never done one before, but yeah, why not? Let me see what this is all about. And so that's like awesome. He did a podcast with me, and it was really cool.
Yeah, when he did that he came back from his first tour with Ani. I always remember this. I asked him how it went. And he said, Lach, I think you're going to identify with this. I'm like, what? He said, well, I open up for Ani. It's 2,000 of her fans. None of them know me. They're there to see her. And out comes this sweaty, bald guy just screaming at them in a microphone. And I was like, I don't know how this is going to work. But they loved it. He's like, I got a standing ovation. They called me back for an encore. I go, well, Ed, that sounds fantastic. He goes, no, Lach. On the third song in the seventh row, halfway through the song, someone turned and talked to somebody else during my song. he's like, that's what I remember. I'm like, oh man, I could so relate. You forget the 2,000 people who gave you an ovation. You remember that person in the seventh row who talked during the third song.
That's comedians. We could really relate to that too. It's like there's that meme they made about it where it's like you see this room full of laughing people, and then one person like sitting cross-armed or talking to their friends, and it's like what the comedian sees, and it's those two people.
It's so true.
So true, man. So do you think you were able to give your children, or how many kids do you have? Is it just one or
one? Henry.
Okay. Do you think you were able to give your son a better life in Scotland than he would have had in the United States?
Well, it's not a controlled experiment, but I mean, I had stalkers in New York, and they knew that I had a child, so it was getting increasingly dangerous to my family to still be on the Lower East Side. So no, I think it was the right move to get out of there and to come here. Also, Scotland has, as part of the UK, has National Health Service. So medical care is free here. I mean, one of the questions I'm always asked, like when someone hears my accent, oh, where are you from? New York. First of all, they say, oh, I've always wanted to go to New York. But they always, like, the third or fourth question is, how come nobody there wants free health care? Like, why do they want to pay for it? I don't understand. I'm like, please, I don't know. I can't help you with this. So there's that. And if he decides to go to university, the university will be free.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. I don't know. We came back to New York last year, and I'll be in New York in July. He really enjoyed going to New York. It sparked some memories and stuff. But also, he was last year when he was 16. Because I've been, Hamill's song, "Daddy, Do You Do Drugs" or whatever that's.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Inquiring Minds, I think it's called.
Inquiring Minds, and the chorus is, "I'm gonna lie, I'm gonna lie, I'm gonna lie, I'm gonna lie." So I've been sort of parsing out as he grows up, who his dad is, just so I don't overwhelm him too quickly as far as my adventures on the Lower East Side. But going back there was cool because we walked into a couple of we walked into this one museum. It was on Avenue C. It was the Museum of the Lower East Side, and they had all these pictures of the Tompkins Square Park riots and stuff. And I was able to go, "Look, Henry, there I am in that
wow
picture. That's me there."
Well, what does he know so far? Does he know about the music scenes, or does he know a little bit, or what all does he know right now?
He knows most of it now.
Okay.
He knows most of it now. Yeah, he knows most of it now.
Does he think you're cool?
As much as anybody does. Well, you'd have to ask him. I played the Mercury Lounge last year, and he came to the show. Uh-huh. And so that was his first time seeing me do a show that I didn't edit anything from him.
Uh-huh.
Ed brought up Detroit a little bit differently, his son Detroit, such a cool name.
Yeah.
I think, Ed exposed him to the show business side of things, right from the beginning. But he saw me for the first time was at Mercury Lounge, and I didn't edit anything,
Mm-hmm.
And I came backstage afterwards, and he was there, and I said, "So, what'd you think?" And he said, "Everybody always tells me about you, but finally getting to see it for myself, it was amazing." And that was one of the best moments of my entire life when he said that. It was like every dad point bell just rang. I was like, yes.
That's awesome, man. Is he following the footsteps? Does he do music, or what's he into?
He has a guitar in his room, and he plays a little bit. He told me he writes raps, but he's not ready to share them with me yet. So my feeling is his stuff is way more X-rated than my stuff.
Nice.
But he just graduated high school, and when I came to Scotland, I don't talk about it too much, but part of it was my wife had cancer, and we came to Scotland to get away from. Everybody knew what was going. We just wanted our own life somewhere. And so as the cancer progressed, I had to come off the road and become a full-time caretaker. And so that's when I wrote the novel, because I was home now. So in between caretaking, I could get to the desk and do a bit of writing. And so that show really last year in New York was my first return to being in the public eye for probably about 5 years. Mm-hmm. And this show that I'm going to do in New York in July, which I guess this broadcast means the show's already happened. This will be an extension of that. And now that Henry's graduated school and wants to travel around the world, he's not sure what he wants to do. And I realized, and my wife passed a couple of years ago.
Condolences.
So coming out of the grief and caretaking and all that, I'm starting to glimpse a new horizon out there and realize sort of like the world's my oyster. I can go anywhere, do anything. I'm not beholden to anybody. And so I'm starting to get used to that. I wrote a poem about it called Soon I'll Go A-Visitin'. And it's sort of this idea of realizing I've got such cool friends around the world that I might take a year out and visit people. And many of them are songwriters. So take like a little digital recorder with me and visit some of my songwriting friends and maybe do some collaborative songwriting and create an album out of that or something. Just some thoughts.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And first of all, condolences. And, let's get into the book then, since you, Yeah. I recently read this. I enjoyed it very much. Langdimania. It's, I'll give you my, I always have a hard time talking about books because I don't want to spoil it for another potential reader, but I also have like a lot of thoughts and stuff. So I always like try to be careful with my questions, you know, but, I kind of thought it was like part Narnia, part Hitchhiker's Guide. And it was also like a little bit of like Matt Christopher, but for theater kids. I don't know if you,
I don't know that.
So Matt Christopher, this was sort of people like I'm a millennial, like millennials, like kind of first wave millennials, if you will. We grew up with Matt Christopher. He was a novel writer, but it was young adult, or I guess even juvenile, you would say, fiction. But it was about like kids who played sports, basically. Like someone was on the baseball team, someone was on the football team. And it was really cool stuff. Like I read all of his books when I was like in second, third grade. And, this kind of reminded me of, I mean, it's a little more like I feel like yours is kind of like more middle school, high school. But like it reminded me a little bit of Matt Christopher, except it's like for the theater kids. And as a theater kid, I appreciated that a lot.
Yeah, no, I've never heard of Matt Christopher. The Narnia thing, the short pitch I give people when people say, what's the book like? I say, well, picture Ferris Bueller goes to Narnia.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I enjoyed it very much. So what gave you the idea for the story itself? Like kind of how did that materialize? I mean, obviously you were going through a heavy thing personally and.
Well, I had the story in my head for a long time, and some of the things that happen in the book, the first Fringe show I did was called The Day I Went Insane, and when I started writing, I thought, oh, you know what? I think that might be a book if I just take out the songs and write what I would say on stage down on paper. I may have a book. So I did that. And I thought, oh, this is a book. It's 15,000 words. That's like huge. And then I Googled how long should a novel be? And it was like 60,000 words. I was like, oh, this is not a book. Okay. So I started working on it more. And it's that The Day I Went Insane is like an anecdotal memoirs. And when BBC Radio 4 approached me about doing a series. They had seen me at the Fringe. I said, oh, well, what do you picture it being? And they said that they thought I was like the new David Sedaris, which I thought was too big a shoes to be putting me into. But I was like, okay. And they said, we'll have you read your stories and in front of a live audience like Sedaris does. That's the show. I said, oh, okay. And they said, well, you don't seem too excited about that. I said, well, me reading on stage, it's not all that exciting. And they said, yes, but it's BBC Radio 4. And I said, yeah, that doesn't mean anything to me. I don't know BBC Radio 4. I know Howard Stern, And they said the magic words. They said, it's the station where Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was created. That was where it was first broadcast. And I'm a huge fan of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, especially the original radio broadcast. That's how I first heard Hitchhikers. So I was like, okay, well, forget me reading on stage. I want it like Hitchhiker. I want synthesized music. I want special effects. I want the Doctor Who library of special effects at my disposal, man. So that's what we created. That's what the Lach Chronicles became. It has all this fantastic soundscape stuff along with the comedy. Had a great sound team, a company called Dabster Productions. You'll probably meet them when you get here to the Fringe. They produced it. And so The Day I Went Insane became the Lach Chronicles. Like I would take things from that book and turn it into episodes of the radio show. And one of the scenes that actually happened to me and is in my memoir and is fictionalized in my book, Langdimania, the novel, is when the lead character, Army, creates a slave chain letter in his high school, the Ponzi scheme where he has his classmates as servants all to each other. I actually did that in school.
Oh, wow.
So it's in my memoir. And even back then, I called it Langdimania as a kid. And I did give Wendy the scroll of servants that she threw back in my face and called me crazy. So.
Are you still in touch with the real life Wendy?
No, I haven't seen her since high school. But I wrote a song. One of the songs on my album today has a song called Wendy, and it's about her. So that sort of was all in my mind, yeah. And I would read to Henry at night in bed. And one night, we had finished the book the night before, and I didn't have a new book, and he needed something to be read to him. And so I started improvising the story of Langdimania. And the next night, he wanted to hear more. And the next night, he wanted to hear more, and I didn't have the rest, you know. So I was like, I got to write this book. And that's how it became a book. It took another several years before it reached publication.
So how is that? And you know what? It's interesting. Like there have been several, people that kind of have roots in anti-folk that have also done stuff, for a kind of like younger audience. Like this book is totally, I mean, an adult can enjoy it too, but it's definitely, a middle schooler could connect with it and stuff like that. And it kind of made me think of, when Kimia Dawson decided to make a children's album and stuff like that. So how has that kind of new wheelhouse been for you? I mean, like as far as like doing stuff for younger people, as in children.
Well, the book came out on Amazon, I don't know, a half a year to a year ago, but it officially was published in April, just a few months ago. Mm-hmm. And the publishing company, the Book Whisperers, is the publishing company, and they worked with a PR company to launch the book. Actually, it was J.K. Rowling's publicist, which was pretty cool, I guess. Do
they still have all the signs in Edinburgh, or have they since taken those down? Are they still there?
Where J.K. Rowling wiped her butt here and all that.
Yeah. That's all still up. Or maybe in recent years they might be like, we might want to take this down.
No, it's still up. I mean, there's the controversy around her and stuff, but she's still one of the best-selling authors of all time,
Right.
So it's still tourist and stuff. But I lost track of what we were saying. About being in the world with the kids. So we did our first event. It was a children's book festival, and I arrived there. And I arrive at things like this. I feel like this. Like it's like Charles Bukowski goes to Disneyland. It's like I feel like I'm this grizzled, gutter snipe who had tracking mud all over Mary Poppins' clean rugs, And so they put me on this panel with two other writers, and there's an MC and a host who's asking us questions. And there's like 100 people it was like an outdoor tent. So there's parents and little kids, and I'm just trying to behave as best I can. I don't want to mar any little psyches. So, but these other two authors are just so square, and they're answering the questions. It just is so square. And I'm from like the after hours dive bar comedy club scene. It's hard for me to handle it, but I'm trying my best, But finally, the last question was, what inspires you to write? What inspires you to write? So the other two both give like the stock answer of whatever inspires them to write. And then the MC turns to me and says, and Lach, what inspires you to write? And I just couldn't help it. I leaned in close to the microphone and I just said, Satan.
How did it get a laugh? How'd it go?
The place erupted.
Nice.
You could see all the dads cracking up. Like the dads were like doubling over. Kids were cheering. The kids were screaming. Some of the moms were like trying to hold back a smile. And some of the moms were glowering at me, just like, don't you know where you are kind of thing. But at the book signing afterwards, I'm the one who had the line coming up to me for the book. So, thank you, Satan.
Nice.
So I don't know. It's a hard thing, because I am anti-folk, I don't fit in most places and I'm okay with that. And I've never changed myself, to fit in. I am who I am. And I think that most kids, have natural filters. If you're doing something that's overtly horror story or violent or really graphic sexually, that could be quite harmful. But if you're just sort of being a grown-up and you don't cadge your language around the kids, they pretty much filter it out because they don't understand it. They don't understand what they're hearing. So it just bounces off of them and they pick up what they will understand and run with that. So I think we don't give kids enough credit for their discerning abilities and their filter systems. In fact, in the book itself, there's lots of big words. Right. I mean, it is, as you say, a middle-age or young adult book. I think anyone from the age of 70 to 90 will enjoy this book, but they'll enjoy it on different levels. So early in the book, like you'll see in the book, I have footnotes. I like the footnotes. And at one point, the 12-year-old boy, Army, goes to detention, and it says he slunked into his seat. And there's a little asterisk next to the word slunked, and the footnote says, hey, I've made up this word slunked. Yeah. And you'll find other words in this book are made up, but eventually, because of this book, they will become words. Yeah. What words can you make up? And also, which words do you think in this book are made up? This way, as they continue to read the book and they get to a quote unquote hard word, they'll look it up to see whether I made it up or not. And this way, they learn new words, and it's educational, rather than the advice I was getting from early editors going, you have to change this. The kids won't understand that word. I go, then they'll either accept it as a made-up word and they'll understand it within context, or it'll encourage them to expand their frickin' vocabulary.
Right. No, I think that's awesome, man. There's different languages in your book, too.
Oh, there's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of different languages, little snippets here and there. So, it might challenge a kid to be like, oh, I want to learn French or Italian or something.
Yeah. So there's French, there's Italian, there's Polish, and there's Chinese because, well, I don't know in the introduction if you've already told your listeners what the book is about, but have you? Have they?
I'll give a little. I'll record it after this. So,
okay.
Yeah, I'll give them like a brief synopsis, but.
Yeah, so it's basically the 12-year-old boy, Army, gets this little toy for his birthday. This is a ball with little buttons on it that he can press. And he imagines that when he presses the button, various wild things happen, including he could suddenly understand other languages. And he seems to be going to this other dimension called Langdimania, where these talking animals have been expecting his arrival, all while he's trying out for the High School Musical. And, so there's the scenes where he's hearing somebody speak Polish and he could suddenly understand it. So, I have all these other languages in there. And so far, I haven't gotten any letters from anybody going, when you said this Italian guy said this here, he was actually talking about da 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 da. Like, so far, I think I've succeeded in my translations.
I mean, I speak a little bit of Italian, and from what I remember, yeah, you got everything right there. So I can't speak for any of the other languages, but
I loved writing the pizzeria guy.
Yeah,
writing his character. That was so much fun. It's like with comedy and with sitcoms. If you know the character, inside out, then it almost writes itself. It's like taking dictation because you know what the character would say. And in many ways, that's what makes a great sitcom. Like if you watch Seinfeld, something might happen and the camera pans to George and he doesn't say anything. But because we know George, we know exactly what he's thinking and we laugh.
Yeah. So is there going to be a continuation of Langdimania? Do you think there's going to be more?
I don't know. Phone Spielberg. Tell him to make me an offer.
That's fair. Yeah. So you have like a very, extensive body of work. For somebody who may not be all that familiar with your music, where would you encourage them to start?
Well, I've purposely kept my music off of all digital platforms except for Bandcamp. Some of my stuff from compilation albums might be on Spotify and stuff. I've tried to get it taken down. They do not make it easy. I cannot get my music off of there. So it's Bandcamp. So if you want to remind your listeners, my name is spelled Lach. So it's lach.bandcamp.com. So it's lach.bandcamp.com. And there's a bunch of stuff up there they could listen to right away. But what I encourage people to do is to subscribe, to become a fan of mine on Bandcamp, because A, it's really cheap. It's like 50 cents a week. And B, they get lots of cool stuff. So as soon as they join, they get instantly all of my albums with all of the artwork. They get all of my singles. They get my BBC radio comedy series. And then every 2 weeks, I put out a new single and cartoon, and they get that exclusive to the fans. And it really...
What's the cartoon about?
The cartoons are generally, I have a comic strip called Wentworth.
Oh, nice.
And so it's this character Wentworth, and he's sort of like, what is he like? I want to, how you do it. So this meets that. Like, like we said, our book was Narnia meets Ferris Bueller, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've got the first part. He's pink. Oh, I got it. He's Pink Panther meets Bugs Bunny.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, no, I have a comic about me and my cat. It's called Lucy and Ron.
Oh, okay.
So, the illustrator's actually out in New York, and then I'm here in LA. So we're cross coast production. But yeah.
Well, that's great. Yeah. So all of that stuff is on Bandcamp, latch.bandcamp.com. Otherwise, I'm scattered on YouTube and stuff like that. Ron, I've been thinking, like, as I've been sort of coming out of my hermit lifestyle over the last couple of years, I've really been thinking about what is the difference between creating one's art and then putting the art out there. Now, in comedy, and I think comedy, I wouldn't say it's the only, but I think comedy is the art form that's most dependent upon other people,
Yes.
It's about making people laugh, and if you're, especially stand-up comedy, I mean, if you're like James Thurber and you're a humorist, you could just write, or Mark Twain. But if you're a stand-up, if you're Richard Pryor or something, you need the audience. That's the gig,
Right.
So I understand that. But other than that, for me as a musician or as a poet or as a cartoonist or a writer or whatever, like, let's take songwriting. When I write a song, when the song is finished, I have a real innate sense of joy. I just get so high that the song has been finished. It feels great. And I have an urge to play it at least for one person, It feels like the song doesn't really exist until at least one person hears it. But after one person hears it, why is it important for more people to hear it? And when I listen to rock stars, get interviewed, and it's like, what do you hope will happen with your music? Invariably, as they say, I want as many people to hear it as possible. And my question is, why? Why is 100 people more important than one? Why is 1,000 more than 100? Why is 100,000 people more important than 1,000? It starts to me to sound like addiction, and I need more, I need more. It starts to sound like attachment to worldly things. And I'm not sure exactly if that's important to me. And so I've done a lot of thinking about it. And like the most I came up with a sort of weak answer was, well, it might be fun. Why do I want 1,000 people to hear this song? Oh, maybe it'll be fun. Or I'll say to myself, well, maybe there's someone out there that will benefit from hearing my song. And it's a form of doing service, by getting the song out there and someone hears it and it helps them with their day, then that's a form of service. But I'm not fully sure about, that's why I like the Bandcamp fan club so much, because right now I've got 150 subscribers, right? So I know that every 2 weeks I put that song up on Bandcamp. 150 people are going to enjoy it. They're going to dig it. They're invested in it because they're paying that 50 cents a week, and that's cool. But I don't know, especially, we're fighting the military-industrial entertainment complex, and when you see what is out there, I think that this complex discovered a while ago the danger of art, the danger of music. We know the CIA had infiltrated the abstract expressionist movement, Jackson Pollock and all that stuff. I mean, that's on record. Phil Oakes, we know Phil Oakes was being what they call tailgated, where they would follow him, but they would let him know he was being followed. I have a song called 60s Girl about Jean Seberg, the actress who was followed by the CIA, and they planted stories in the press to discredit her in an attempt to discredit the anti-war movement. And the stress of that disinformation caused her to miscarry her baby. And then a few years later, she committed suicide on the day that would have been the birthday of that baby. So we know that there were forces doing things like this, MK Ultra, let's say. And then we really saw it with John Lennon. John Lennon said he was going to sing outside the Republican National Convention in 1972. They were going to have a Beatle against Nixon, and they were like, let's kick this guy out of the country. We can't do this. So I think the clamp came down, and I think punk rock lifted it for a little bit, and then it got slammed down as soon as Bloomingdale's was selling $500 gold safety pins. And then it got threatened a little bit by grunge and with Kurt Cobain, but that got shut down. And they were like, why do we have to deal with these artists and stuff? We'll just keep the conveyor belt going, in sync, backs, we'll just keep it prepackaged, Britney Spears, Harry Styles. We don't have to worry. Let's give them 6 writers to fit in the focus group music. And now, with AI and artificial intelligence and having trained a generation that auto-tuning and beat justification is what songs should sound like, and if they don't, then they don't sound right, they've prepared the next generation to have all of their music and songs not even involve a human artist. It'll just be created by AI algorithms, and they'll put some cute person on the thing wearing some rebellious outfit, and that's going. So in anti-folk, we know that the true joy, the true magic, the true art still is that campfire that we gather around to sing our songs to each other, to be with each other in these secret underground bars that they're trying to close down, And so that's where I tend to get my my joy from. That's where I'm not trying to change the world. I'm just trying to welcome people into mine if they stumble upon me.
That was Lach. Be sure to check out his website at lach.bandcamp.com. Check out his music. Check out the book. I highly recommend all of it. Music for the 1000 Podcast is provided by Andrew Saxena. Be sure to check out his podcast, the Baywatching Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. I said podcast way too many times in that sentence. Leave us a 5-star review, would you please? It really helps the algorithm for this podcast, and it goes a long way. So please, if you don't mind, leave us a 5-star review. If you want to support this show on the sustainability end, you can do so over at patreon.com/romplacone. For a give what you can level, you get all kinds of exclusive content. I'll make you a theme song, and you get the bonus 1000 podcast featuring Andrew and myself, and you get to see all of my films before anybody else does. So that's patreon.com/romplacone. All right, that was episode 11. Not quite the milestone that 10 is. 10, the official double-digit number. 11, the number after the official double-digit number, but making some progress. 989 more to go. See you guys next week. Hey guys, Romplacone here. Take your own 1000 challenge. No, you don't need to interview 1,000 people, although if you want to do that, go for it. Your 1000 challenge can be whatever you want. Maybe you want to call a friend out of the blue once a week. Maybe you want to read a book every month. Maybe you want to start a different garden every season. I guess that might be dependent on where you live. Look, the point of the challenge is taking on an endeavor that enriches your life in some way, and it can be measured. And then, of course, you do it regularly. That's what 1000 is doing for me, and hopefully for you too. The main reason for this podcast and every podcast I've ever done is to build community. So take your own challenge. Then join our Facebook group. It's called 1000 What's Your Challenge? ? That's 1000 What's Your Challenge ? And post about what your 1000 challenge is and the progress you're making. All I ask is that people be encouraging of each other's challenges. This is personal and vulnerable, so be cool. There's enough negativity on social media. We don't need to add to it. For those of you who aren't on Facebook, hopefully in the future we'll be expanding to places like Discord, Reddit, but for now, we're starting on Facebook. And again, that Facebook group is called 1000 What's Your Challenge? See you there.